Some inboards didn't just break down, they wrecked boats, weekends, and wallets. Engines that overheated until they locked solid, drives that slipped into neutral mid-docking, and manifolds that leaked fire and water into the bilge. These weren't minor flaws, they were disasters waiting to happen. From Chrysler's oversized big blocks to OMC's notorious failures, these are the 17 most dangerous inboard engines ever built, and one of them could literally blow itself apart. On the street, Chrysler's 440 was king. Drop it into a boat, and suddenly it became a liability. The block was enormous and heavy, and the narrow, cooling passages clogged up quickly in salt water. Overheating was so common that many owners carried spare gaskets on board, expecting them to fail. Once the head gasket blew, hydrolock followed, and bent rods weren't far behind. One marina mechanic remembered the sound well, a loud metallic thud mid-channel, followed by silence. When they pulled the heads, water sat in the cylinders like soup. The 440 was powerful, but it destroyed itself when pushed too hard in marine duty. To make matters worse, the exhaust manifolds rotted out from the inside. That led to water leaks, exhaust fumes in the bilge, and even fires. In cars, the 440 made legends. In boats, it mostly made towboat operators rich. And that's only the first. Coming up, engines that caught fire, drives that quit mid-dock, and one that revved itself until it exploded. Stick around, you don't want to miss it, and subscribe while you're at it. Few stern drive engines inspire as much groaning as the Cruiser 470. Mercury thought they were being clever, building an aluminum block with an iron Ford 460 head bolted on top. The mismatch was catastrophic. Gaskets blew, coolant boiled off, and warped parts became normal repair items. This engine overheated so often it might as well have come with a steam whistle. One boater recalled replacing the alternator 3 times in 2 seasons because of Mercury's odd design, running it off the camshaft instead of a belt. When it failed, the wiring fried, leaving the boat dead in the water. That wasn't a rare occurrence, it was routine. Add in a water pump seal that leaked coolant into the oil, and you had an engine that quietly destroyed itself. The 470 promised modern efficiency, but delivered mechanical Russian roulette. Many marinas eventually refused to even work on them. The Ford 302 was a solid small block on land, but paired with OMC's infamous stringer stern drive, it became a problem child. The electric shift system, designed to look futuristic, was its downfall. Instead of solid clutches, it relied on solenoids and oil pressure. When they quit, the drive often slipped into neutral with no warning. A docking maneuver could turn into an accident in seconds. A dock worker once watched a family try to back into a slip, only to slam straight into the pier when reverse never engaged. The skipper thought he was at fault, until he learned it was just another stringer failure. Leaking gear cases, water intrusion, and sticky steering cables only added to the frustration. For owners, the stringer wasn't just a nuisance, it was unpredictable. And unpredictability in a marina full of fiberglass hulls is never a good thing. Volvo's AQ170 was an attempt to turn a smooth car engine into a marine workhorse. It was based on the B30 Inline 6, which ran beautifully in sedans. But in boats, its weaknesses quickly surfaced. Cooling passages were too narrow for raw water use, and salt buildup meant overheating was inevitable. Worse still, the exhaust manifolds had a habit of cracking internally. That sent water straight into the cylinders and locked the engine solid. One owner recalled coasting silently to a stop in the middle of a lake. When he lifted the hatch, steam hissed out, and a cracked manifold was spraying water everywhere. By the time a tow arrived, the damage was beyond repair. The AQ170 looked good in brochures and sounded smooth when new, but the design wasn't built for the punishment of marine duty. Volvo eventually moved on, leaving this six-cylinder as a cautionary tale. Crusader usually built reliable marine engines, but the 305 small block Chevy was the weak link. Unlike the beefier 350, the 305 had thin cylinder walls and didn't tolerate sustained high RPMs. Overheating was frequent, heads cracked, and intake manifolds warped after just a few seasons of hard use. Salt water made things worse, eating away at cooling passages and manifolds until failure was inevitable. One mechanic recalled a cabin cruiser with twin Crusader 305s that was in the shop every spring. Each year brought new gasket failures and overheated blocks. Finally, the owner gave up and repowered with 350s, which instantly solved the issues. The 305 was marketed as affordable power, but it was penny-wise and pound-foolish. For boaters, affordable often turned into repeat repair bills. The Crusader badge usually meant dependability, except when it was stamped onto a 305. When OMC rolled out the 400 and 800 drives, they looked like a leap forward. In reality, they were fragile at best and downright dangerous at worst. Gear cases cracked under stress, and the clutch dog system slipped under load. Skiers often complained that boats lost thrust halfway through a pull, and it wasn't their imagination. One marina owner recalled a customer docking with an 800 drive that slipped into neutral just as he lined up the slip. The boat slid sideways into the pier, and the owner thought it was operator error. The shop knew better. Hydraulic tilt leaks, corroding housings, and poor durability meant these drives spent more time on lifts than in the water. What should have been OMC's ticket to compete with Mercury instead became a warranty nightmare. Grey Marine's 327 was a marinized Chevy small block that promised muscle but often delivered misery. Exhaust manifolds corroded from the inside out, dripping water into the cylinders. Once that happened, hydrolock wasn't a possibility, it was a guarantee. Overheating also cracked blocks and left boats stranded. One wooden boat restorer once said every grey 327 he opened had at least one cylinder rusted solid. In one case, the motor was locked so tightly from water intrusion that it couldn't even be turned with a breaker bar. Beautiful boats deserved better, but many left the factory saddled with these problem engines. For owners, the grey badge eventually became shorthand for "Bring a spare." 7 down, and the list only gets uglier. Ahead are inboards that smoked out marinas, drives that locked solid at speed, and one engine so flawed mechanics called it a time bomb. Keep watching, the worst is still to come. The Iron Duke 4-cylinder was a budget car engine that GM thought could be stretched into marine life. In Mercury trim, it became known as the little engine that couldn't. Underpowered for most boats, it lived at wide-open throttle just to stay on plane. That constant stress meant overheating, cracked heads, and short lives. One mechanic remembered a regular customer who blew 2 head gaskets in a single summer. The poor little motor was simply pushed too hard every trip, and the shop told him the fix was simple. Repower with a bigger engine. Cheap to buy but costly to keep alive, the Iron Duke turned out to be a poor match for the water. Boats need reserve power, and this 4-banger simply didn't have it. The Cobra was supposed to be OMC's great comeback in the 1980s, paired with GM's strong 4.3 V6. Instead, it became a liability. Alignment between engine and drive was often off, wearing components prematurely. Worse, the shifting cables stretched, leading to unpredictable stalls or refusal to shift at all. One marina worker recalled watching a boat try to reverse into a slip, only for the drive to refuse. The vessel drifted bow first into another cruiser, and the red-faced skipper could only shrug. It wasn't his fault. The Cobra had a mind of its own. Accidents and lawsuits piled up, and despite OMC's efforts, the Cobra's reputation never recovered. When OMC folded, the drive's fate was sealed, leaving owners with orphaned boats and mechanics who didn't want the work. Chrysler's 318 small block was tough in trucks, but when marinized, it gained a nasty reputation. Exhaust manifolds cracked after just a few seasons, and corrosion chewed them apart in salt water. Leaks sent exhaust into bilges or raw water into cylinders, both dangerous outcomes. Carburetors that refused to stay, tuned only added to the frustration. One boater shared that he began feeling lightheaded while cruising his cuddy cabin. Lifting the hatch revealed exhaust fumes filling the bilge thanks to a rotted manifold. That was a common experience, not a rare one. Reliable in cars, the 318 in marine form proved unpredictable and hazardous. It reminded owners that not every tough engine on land survives once you add salt and water. The Perkins 6.354 became one of the most common diesels in trawlers and small commercial craft. Its lightweight and simple design looked attractive, but the weaknesses soon showed. Crankshafts had a habit of breaking under load, and cylinder heads were prone to cracking if the engine overheated even slightly. The clouds of smoke they left behind became legendary. A fisherman once joked that he never had to use a radio because anyone could find him just by following the haze of black exhaust his Perkins left in its wake. The humor was thin, though, after it left him limping home at half power with a cracked injector sleeve. Popular doesn't always mean bulletproof, and the 6.354 proved it. Thousands were sold, but many owners learned to keep spares and repair kits on hand because breakdowns were almost part of the ownership package. In the 1980s, BMW decided to try its hand at marine engines. They looked sleek, sounded exotic, and promised European engineering. What boaters got instead were corrosion-prone cooling systems and fragile timing chains. Salt water in particular ate them alive, and support was limited even when new. One owner remembered waiting months for a simple part to arrive from Germany while his boat sat useless on its trailer. When it finally came, the repair lasted a season before another failure sidelined him again. That wasn't an unusual story, it was the norm. BMW quickly abandoned the marine venture, leaving owners stranded with orphan engines. Today, if you find one, it's usually in a restoration project, where the first step is yanking it out. Exotic on paper, disappointing on the water. Chris-Craft made some of the most beautiful boats in history, but not every engine under their hoods was a gem. Their version of the GM 283 small block was notorious for overheating, blowing gaskets, and carburetors that flooded when you least expected it. Exhaust manifolds corroded quickly, sometimes leaking raw water right into the cylinders. One restorer recalled firing up a Chris-Craft 283 for the first time in years, only to watch water pour into the oil pan through a cracked riser. The engine didn't even survive its first hour back in service. The 283 looked great when new and sounded sweet at idle, but reliability was another story. For many boaters, owning one meant a cycle of breakdown, repair, and repeat. The Detroit 671 earned fame in trucks and buses, but when marinized, especially with turbos, it became dangerous in a new way. Runaways. A runaway diesel ignores the throttle and revs itself to death, often until parts explode. On boats, that's not just a breakdown, it's terrifying. One engineer recalled watching a 671 scream itself past redline in a fishing boat. Crew scrambled, trying to block the air intake with a board. By the time they killed it, the damage was catastrophic. Stories like that left a deep impression on anyone who worked around them. Plenty of Detroits ran for decades without issue, but the ones that went bad went really bad. A runaway in a small engine room could be one of the scariest moments a skipper ever faced. The King Cobra was OMC's answer to Mercury's high-performance stern drives. Paired with GM big blocks, it promised speed and muscle. Unfortunately, the cone clutch system slipped constantly, overheating the gear oil until drives seized. Owners often reported sudden loss of thrust at speed, not something you want offshore. One boater told of cruising at 40 miles per hour when the drive locked solid, sending passengers stumbling and nearly throwing someone overboard. When the drive was opened up, the gears looked like they'd been through a blender. Parts support dried up quickly after OMC folded in the 1990s, leaving owners stranded with expensive paperweights bolted to their transoms. The King Cobra carried a fierce name, but in reality it had more bite for its owners than for the water. When OMC paired Ford's massive 460 with their stern drives, they thought they had built the ultimate power package. In reality, they created a maintenance nightmare. The 460's huge torque was more than the drives could comfortably handle, and cooling issues plagued the big block. Overheating was common, and the heavy cast manifolds often cracked after only a few seasons. Once water leaked into the cylinders, hydrolock was just around the corner. One mechanic recalled pulling the heads off a 460 and finding 2 pistons rusted solid from water intrusion. The owner had only noticed that the boat started hard. By then, the damage was done. Big horsepower sounded appealing in the showroom, but in the water it came with a cost. These packages were expensive to maintain, difficult to keep aligned, and prone to failure. For many owners, the 460 OMC became a big, heavy reminder that not all muscle belongs at sea. Yanmar built its reputation on reliability, but the early 6 LP diesels from the late 1990s and early 2000s were an exception. These lightweight 6-cylinders were designed for speed, yet their heads were prone to cracking under high load. Injectors also had issues, sometimes leaking and causing hot spots that led to piston damage. Offshore, those failures could leave boats stranded. One Sportfisher owner recalled losing power 20 miles out when his 6LP suddenly started smoking and knocking. By the time he limped back to port, the head had cracked and coolant was in the oil. The repair bill was enough to make him swear off that model forever. Yanmar eventually corrected the design, but those early engines left a mark on their reputation. Light and fast wasn't much comfort when reliability sank with it. Even today, mechanics warn buyers to think twice before taking on an early 6LP. Not every inboard was built to last, and some should never have been built at all. From cracked blocks to runaway diesels, these 17 engines proved that power means nothing without reliability. If you've ever owned one, you probably have a story that still stings, so drop it in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into boating's best and worst, and stick around. The next list might just save you from another disaster.